"Dad, you're not competent to make these decisions anymore." My daughter Natalie said those words to my lawyer while sitting in my own living room, as if I weren't there. "Natalie," I said quietly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." She turned to me with that look, the one that said she was dealing with a confused old man. "Dad, please, let the adults talk." I was 71 years old. Natalie was 42. Apparently, I'd stopped being an adult in her eye. My lawyer, Cole, looked uncomfortable. He'd known me for 20 years. "Victor," Cole said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No need," Natalie interrupted. "Dad's not thinking clearly anymore. He's forgetting appointments, getting confused about his medication." That was a lie. I'd called her once to ask about lunch this weekend. "Dad, you called me 3 times yesterday asking the same question," Natalie continued, addressing Cole as if I were a child. The room fell silent. I looked at my daughter and realized something had changed. She wasn't here because she was concerned about my welfare. She was here because she was concerned about my will. "Cole," I said, "I'd like to speak with you privately." "Dad, that's exactly what I'm talking about," Natalie said, her voice rising. "You get confused and suspicious when people try to help you. You become paranoid about family support. Dr. Reeves says these are classic warning signs." She emphasized those words like medical diagnoses. Dr. Reeves, my physician of 12 years, who'd given me a clean bill of health just 2 weeks ago. "When did you speak to Dr. Reeves?" I asked. Natalie's face flushed slightly. I asked him about signs of dementia. As your daughter, I have a right to be concerned. You called my doctor without telling me?" "Dad, please don't get agitated. This is what I mean about your paranoia." I stood up slowly. "Natalie, I think you should leave. You see?" She looked at Cole desperately. "He can't handle a simple conversation about his future care. This is exactly why I need to be involved in his legal decisions." But Cole was watching me carefully. After 20 years, he knew the difference between a man who was confused and a man who was angry. "Natalie," Cole said finally, "I think your father is right. This conversation should be between Victor and me. But, Natalie," I said, my voice steady, "please leave my house." She gathered her purse with sharp, jerky movements. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when you make a mistake you can't fix." At the door, she turned back. "Cole, I hope you'll remember your professional responsibility. My father isn't capable of making sound financial decisions anymore." After she left, Cole and I sat in silence for a long moment. "Victor," he said finally, "how long has this been going on?" 6 months, I said. "Ever since I mentioned I was thinking about updating my will." "And what exactly were you planning to update?" I pulled out a folder. I'd prepared weeks ago. "I want to set up a scholarship fund in Carol's name, for nursing students. Carol would have liked that." Cole nodded. "That's a wonderful idea. And Natalie objects? She thinks the money should stay in the family, specifically with her." "I see." Cole opened his briefcase. "Victor, I need to ask you some questions. Not because I doubt your capacity, but because Natalie just made some serious allegations in front of a witness." "Ask whatever you need to ask." For the next hour, Cole walked me through a series of questions designed to assess cognitive function: date, time, current events, mathematical calculations, memory tests. I answered every question correctly. "Victor," Cole said when we finished, "there's nothing wrong with your mental capacity. You're as sharp as you were 20 years ago." "Then why is Natalie saying these things?" Cole closed his notebook. "Because she's scared you're going to give away her inheritance." The words hung in the air between us. "What do I do?" I asked. "You protect yourself," Cole said grimly. "And Victor, I think you should know that Natalie isn't the first adult child I've seen try this approach." What Cole meant was that Natalie was trying to have me declared incompetent so she could control my assets. What I was beginning to understand was that my daughter had been planning this for months. What neither of us knew was that I'd been planning something too. Natalie thought she'd be the first one to involve the courts in our family business. She was wrong. While she was researching how to have me declared incompetent, I'd already been to the courthouse. I'd already filed first. The first call I made the next day was to Dr. Reeves. "I'd like to know about the conversation you had with my daughter," I said when he came to the phone. "Victor, you know I can't discuss about me. She claims you're worried about my cognitive state." Dr. Reeves sighed. "Your daughter called last month asking about signs of dementia and age-related cognitive decline. General questions," she said, because she was worried about you living alone." "What did you tell her?" "That you're in excellent health, both physically and mentally, that you show no signs of cognitive impairment. And yet she told my lawyer you've been worried about me for months." Silence. Then, "Victor, that's not what I said. Not even close." "I know. Natalie is lying about my mental state to gain control of my finances. That's elder abuse, Victor. If what you're telling me is true, you should document everything. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and made a list. Every lie Natalie had told yesterday, every concern she'd raised that wasn't true, every attempt to make me seem confused or incompetent. The list was longer than I'd expected. I stared at my daughter's name at the top of the page, written in my own handwriting. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about who I was allowed to be in my own life. If my own child could look me in the eyes and tell a lawyer I wasn't competent, what did that say about everything I'd built, everything I'd accomplished, everything I thought I knew about the person I'd raised? Carol and I had sacrificed so much for Natalie's education, her wedding, her down payment on her first house. We'd been proud parents watching our daughter succeed. When had I become a problem to be solved instead of a father to be respected? Then I made another call to a private investigator named Franklin. I need to document some things, I told him, about my daughter's behavior. Franklin had helped me once before, years ago, when I suspected an employee was stealing from my business. He was thorough, discreet, and honest. What kind of behavior? I explained Natalie's campaign to have me declared incompetent, the lies to Cole, the unauthorized call to Dr. Reeves, the claims about my mental state. Victor, this sounds like she's building a case for guardianship. Has she mentioned anything about power of attorney? She hadn't, not yet. I want you to document her activities, I said. Phone calls, meetings, anything she's doing related to my competency. I can do that. But Victor, if this escalates, you might need more than documentation. What do you mean? You might need to file a preemptive legal action to protect yourself. I called Cole back that afternoon. What's a preemptive legal action in a situation like this? Well, Cole said, if you're concerned that Natalie is going to petition for guardianship or conservatorship, you could file a declaration of competency. It's a legal document that establishes your mental capacity and your intention to remain in control of your own affairs. Is that what you'd recommend? I'd recommend we wait and see what Natalie does next. But Victor, I want you to start documenting everything, every interaction, every conversation, every claim she makes about your mental state. I was already doing that. What I didn't tell Cole was that I was also doing something else. I was visiting every doctor, accountant, and professional who knew me well, getting written statements about my competency. My banker wrote a letter stating I managed my finances independently. My accountant confirmed my sound financial decisions. Dr. Reeves documented my excellent cognitive function. I was building a fortress of documentation, piece by piece. But late at night, sitting alone in the house I'd shared with Carol for 30 years, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was preparing for war against my own daughter. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. When Carol died, Natalie had held my hand at the funeral. She'd promised me we'd take care of each other. "You'll never be alone, Dad," she'd said. Now I was more alone than I'd ever been, fighting to prove I was competent to live my own life to the child I'd raised to be honest and kind. But Natalie was building something too. Franklin called me 3 days later with his first report. "Your daughter has been making a lot of calls," he said, "to elder law attorneys, to your doctor's office, to the county courthouse." Elder law attorneys? She's been shopping around, asking about guardianship proceedings and conservatorship, specifically about how to have an elderly parent declared incompetent. My blood ran cold. How many attorneys? 4 so far. She seems to be looking for one who'll take her case. What kind of case does she think she has? Franklin was quiet for a moment. "Victor, she's telling these attorneys that you've been diagnosed with dementia, that you're a danger to yourself, that you've been making irrational financial decisions. All lies. Every single claim was a lie. There's more," Franklin continued. "She's been asking about your assets, property values, investment accounts, insurance policies. She's been very thorough. She's cataloging my estate. That's exactly what she's doing." I hung up and called Cole immediately. "We need to file that declaration of competency," I said. "Today." "What's happened?" I told him about Franklin's report, Natalie's calls to elder law attorneys, her lies about my mental state, her research into my assets. "Victor, this is serious. She's clearly preparing to file for guardianship. Once she files, even if she doesn't win, the process becomes public and expensive. Your reputation could be damaged, and you'll spend months proving what we already know, that you're completely competent. So what do? We file first. Cole said. "We go to court and establish your competency before she can challenge it." The legal documents were ready by Friday. A declaration of competency, along with supporting statements from every professional who knew me well. Character references from neighbors and friends, medical evaluations confirming my mental acuity. Cole had also prepared something else, a petition for protective order against Natalie, preventing her from accessing my medical records, financial information, or making any legal claims about my mental state without court approval. "This is more aggressive than I usually recommend," Cole said, "but Natalie has crossed several legal lines already. The unauthorized contact with your doctor, the false statements to attorneys, the invasion of your privacy regarding your assets. We filed everything on Friday afternoon. By law, Natalie had to be notified of the court proceedings within 48 hours. Franklin called me Saturday evening. Your daughter just made a very interesting phone call," he said, "to an attorney named Robert. She was screaming." "Screaming about what?" "About how someone must have tipped you off about her plans. She kept saying he couldn't have known. There's no way. He could have known." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "There's more," Franklin said. "She's scrambling now. She's trying to get an emergency hearing, claiming you're having a mental health crisis. But since you've already established your competency in court, she's going to have a much harder time." "What do you mean?" "Your declaration establishes the legal presumption that you're competent. Now she has to prove you're not, rather than you having to prove you are. It's a much higher legal bar." Sunday morning, Natalie showed up at my house. I watched her through the window for a moment before opening the door. She looked frantic, desperate. "Dad, what have you done?" "I protected myself from false accusations about my mental state." "False accusations?" "Dad, I'm trying to help you." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I saw tears in her eyes. "I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I've done has been because I'm terrified of losing you." For just a second, I almost believed her. This was the daughter who used to climb into my lap when she was scared, who'd cried when I taught her to ride a bike because she was afraid of falling. Then I remembered the recording Franklin had made. By lying to attorneys about my having dementia, by telling my lawyer I'm not competent, by researching my assets without my knowledge, her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Natalie, I know about the 4 elder law attorneys you contacted. I know about your conversations with Robert. I know about your plans to have me declared incompetent. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself from fraud, which is exactly what you're attempting." She tried a different approach. "Dad, you're clearly paranoid. This just proves you need supervision. From someone who lies about me to my own doctor? I don't think so. I never lied to anyone." I pulled out my phone and played a recording Franklin had made. Natalie's voice clear as day, telling an attorney that I'd been diagnosed with dementia and was making irrational financial decisions. Her mouth fell open. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter where I got it. What matters is that you've been systematically lying about my mental state in order to gain control of my assets." "Dad, please. The court hearing is Tuesday at 10. You'll have your chance to present evidence of my incompetency. I hope you have something more substantial than lies." She left without another word. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed in my best suit, the navy one Carol had bought me for our 40th anniversary, and met Cole at the courthouse. "How are you feeling?" he asked as we climbed the steps. "Like I'm fighting for my life," I said, because I am. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Natalie sat on one side with her attorney, Robert, a man in his 50s who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They had a thin folder of documents. Cole and I sat on the other side with 3 boxes of evidence: my competency declaration, medical evaluations, character references, financial records showing sound decision-making, and Franklin's documentation of Natalie's activities. The judge was a woman named Margaret who looked to be about my age. She reviewed both sides' filings before calling the hearing to order. "This is an unusual situation," the judge said. "We have a father seeking to establish his own competency and a daughter seeking to challenge it. Mr. Victor, since you filed first, we'll begin with your presentation." Cole stood and began laying out our case methodically. My spotless medical records, my sound financial management, character testimony from neighbors, professionals, and business associates. He presented the timeline of my interactions with Natalie, documenting her escalating claims about my mental state, despite evidence to the contrary. Then he played Franklin's recording of Natalie lying to the attorney. The judge's expression shifted noticeably. "Mr. Robert," the judge said when Cole finished, I'll hear your client's evidence now. Robert stood, but he looked defeated before he began. Natalie's case rested entirely on her claims that I was forgetful, paranoid, and making poor decisions. But when pressed for specifics, she had none. Your Honor, Robert said weakly, my client is concerned about her father's welfare. She believes he needs supervision and assistance with major decisions. Based on what evidence? The judge asked. Robert shuffled through his thin folder. Based on her observations of his behavior. What behavior, specifically? Robert looked at Natalie, who whispered something to him. He's become suspicious and accusatory, Robert said. He's making claims that people are lying about him. The judge looked at the evidence Cole had presented. According to the documentation before this court, people were lying about him. His daughter was making false statements about his mental capacity to multiple attorneys. How is his awareness of this fact evidence of impaired judgment? Robert had no answer. The judge reviewed our evidence for 20 minutes while the courtroom remained silent. Natalie kept glancing at me, her face cycling through anger, fear, and something that might have been shame. Finally, the judge spoke. Mr. Victor's declaration of competency is granted. The medical evidence, character testimony, and documentation of his sound decision-making all support his mental capacity. Natalie's shoulders slumped. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm granting the protective order. Natalie is prohibited from making any legal claims about her father's mental capacity without presenting substantial medical evidence to this court. The judge looked directly at Natalie. Young lady, what you've done here borders on elder abuse. Making false statements about a parent's mental capacity to gain control of their assets is a serious crime. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for review. After the hearing, Natalie approached me in the courthouse hallway. Dad, I'm sorry. I was just worried about you. No, Natalie, you were worried about my money. That's not true. Then why did you lie about having dementia? Why did you research my assets? Why did you contact 4 different attorneys about having me declared incompetent? She couldn't answer. Natalie, I raised you to be honest, kind, and self-sufficient. I don't know what happened to that person, but this version of you, the one who lies to attorneys and tries to steal from her own father, this person I don't recognize. I walked away from her in that courthouse hallway, and in many ways, I was walking away from my daughter forever. 7 months later, I sat in Cole's office signing the final documents for Carol's nursing scholarship fund. The scholarship committee is very excited, Cole said. They've already identified the first recipients. Carol would be proud, I said. Through Cole's window, I could see the courthouse where I'd fought for my independence. Any word from Natalie? Cole asked. Holiday cards, generic ones. Do you miss her? I thought carefully. I miss the daughter I thought I had, the one who would never have lied about me having dementia. Victor, how did you know to file first? I smiled. 50 years of running a business taught me, when someone's planning to attack your position, don't wait. Strike first, on your own terms. And Natalie? Natalie spent so much time researching how to have me declared incompetent. She never considered I might declare myself competent first. Franklin's final report revealed Natalie's full planning. She'd researched guardianship laws, consulted attorneys, even looked into assisted living facilities. But she'd made one mistake. She'd assumed being 71 made me vulnerable. She'd forgotten it also made me experienced and strategic. Today, I live in the same house I shared with Carol. I manage my own finances and make my own decisions. The nursing scholarship has helped 12 students so far. I meet with them each semester, bright young people who remind me why Carol loved her profession. My health remains excellent. My mind is sharp. My independence is secure. Last month, I received a letter from Natalie. Not a card, but an actual letter. Dad, I know what I did was wrong. I want you to know that I finally understand why you fought so hard. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect. She was right. I was scared, she continued. Scared you'd give everything away. Scared I wouldn't be able to take care of my own family. I convinced myself you weren't thinking clearly, because it was easier than admitting I was thinking selfishly. The letter ended with an apology and a request to rebuild our relationship. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure I will. But I kept the letter because it was the first honest thing Natalie had said to me in over a year. The most important lesson I learned. Competency isn't something other people get to decide for you. It's something you have to claim and defend for yourself. When my daughter told that lawyer I wasn't competent, she was wrong about my mental state. But more importantly, she was wrong about who had the power in our relationship. The day I filed that declaration of competency, I took that power back, and I've never been more competent in my life. But here's what I want to know. If your own child tried to have you declared incompetent to get control of your money, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Or would you do exactly what I did?